Hey everyone, and welcome back for another video. Today we'll be discussing how we can interact with NetBox and Nautobot systems using GraphQL. Okay, so what is GraphQL in general? GraphQL is a query language and a runtime for APIs. It provides a more efficient and powerful alternative to traditional REST APIs. It also allows clients to request only the data they need and nothing more, which makes it more flexible and efficient solution for fetching and manipulating data from a server. Let's imagine that we have NetBox server that is running REST, and on the other side we have a client. And let's say, for example, that we want that client to get data from the NetBox server. So we could potentially use the GET request for a particular object. So we will need to use the correct endpoint for that. Let's say hypothetically that we want to get data from devices in NetBox. So we will need to use this endpoint, API forward slash DCIM forward slash devices. The server will respond to this request and send the data to the client back. Now, let's say that we also want to get interfaces. So we will need to initiate another GET request to get all the interfaces from NetBox. The server will then respond to this request and send us back the data we need. And the list will just increase exponentially according to your use case. This approach might not be the most efficient method you could use. So, maybe another approach would be to get all the data via a single API call and then use Python as an example to select the data you want programmatically. Although I'm not 100% certain if this is feasible, but let's say it is for a moment. And also, if we say that you have loads of data in NetBox, please be aware that the problem with this is the amount of data sent from the server to the client is extremely high. So you might cause network performance degradation, not to mention the client might not be able to process all the data. And the worst case scenario, it might even kill the client. All of this because you want to get some of the data from the server. So I wouldn't really recommend this approach. So this is where GraphQL comes into play, where we can send a query to the server and the server will only send us the data we need. So let's imagine again that we have the same scenario, a server and a client, and the client would send a GraphQL query, and inside the query, you just specify the data that you need from the server. So if you need data for devices and interfaces, you can do this from a single query. The server will then respond back with the exact data you asked for, and also, GraphQL will show you the relationship between the device and the interfaces. For example, if there is an interface, let's say gig000, and you want to see if it is related to device X or not, the answer to this is yes, you can. And I will show you this in a moment. This is where GraphQL comes into play, where we only get data that we need to be more sufficient and more precise about the data we're after. So the purpose of this video is to show you how you harness the power of GraphQL and doesn't explain in details how it works or go through complex query. So let's see how we can interact with NetBox and Nautobot data using GraphQL from the GUI first, and then we will follow this with the Python code demo. Okay guys, so what I'm going to do now, I'm going to log into my NetBox account. And then what I'm going to do, I'm going to scroll all the way down. And then at the bottom of the page, you'll be able to see GraphQL API icon. So I'm going to click on it. And in here, we've got the interface where we're going to interact with the GraphQL GUI from NetBox. What I'm going to do initially, I'm going to say query, and I'm going to open curly brackets. And inside the curly bracket, I'm going to specify the device list. And then I'm going to open another curly brackets, and inside the device list I'm going to say I want the ID as well as the name. And then what I'm going to do, I'm going to execute this, and as you can see on the right hand side is the result of my execution. And you can see that the hierarchy of the data structure, the first object that we get has an ID of 1, and the name of that object is DMI01-AKRON-router or RTR01, and so on and so forth. So if I want to expand on that, what I can do, I can add interfaces. And also I'm going to open up curly brackets, and inside the curly brackets, again, I can specify the ID as well as the name, but in my case, I'm just going to specify the name. And then also I'm going to execute this. And as you can see again, the hierarchy of the list starts from data and then device list, and then each object have a ID as well as the name, and then inside that we have the interfaces which are associated to that device. So on the interfaces list, we have the name as well as the value. So we have gigabit Ethernet 000, and so on and so forth. And you can see that there is also a loopback interface. So if I also want to display the IP address, so what I need to do is I need to specify the IP address. So you would say IP underscore address. And if you execute that again, you will be able to see, okay, so yeah, we will be able to see the ID under the IP address object. And if we also want to say that we want to display the value, so we can say display, and then execute that again, and we can see that each router or each device has some interfaces, or all the interfaces that are associated with it. Each interface then have its own attributes. So you've got the IP address, and each of the IP addresses object, we have the ID as well as the display or the value of the IP address. If we were to go to the loopback 0, for instance, we can see that the ID is 181, and the display is 192.168.10.1. And you can just do the same thing for the rest of the objects, so on and so forth. So although I'm displaying the IP address under the interfaces, but let's say that we also want to display the primary IP for that particular device. So I'm going to say I want to display the primary IPv4 address for that particular device. So I'm going to hit enter, and then we can see that we have the interfaces. And then if we go down, you can see that the primary IPv4 address is this one, which matches the loopback interface 0. So you can see, guys, using GraphQL is very simple and it's very straightforward. You literally get the data that you need, obviously based on the query that you send to the server. But the beauty of it is that we are not bombarding the network with data that we are not going to process or we are not going to use. So this is for NetBox GraphQL. So what I'm going to do next, I'm going to go into Nautobot and I'm going to do the same thing. So initially I'm going to log into my Nautobot account. Bear with me. And then once I've logged in, again, you scroll down, and then on the right hand side, it depends on the version that you have. But again, on the bottom of the page, you will be able to see GraphQL icon. Click on it. And from there, we're going to examine the same scenario where we're going to set the query and then open curly brackets. And inside the curly brackets, we're going to say devices, excuse me, and then we are going to open another curly brackets where we're going to specify the name, and let's say we also want the primary IPv4 address, and inside that object we're also going to open another curly brackets where we specify the address. I also want to display the interfaces, so I'm going to say interfaces, and inside the curly brackets I'm going to specify the name as well as the IP underscore addresses, and inside that I'm going to specify the actual address. As you can see from the GUI is that when you start typing the object that you're after, let's say for example if I want to display the ID, you can see that there is a list that gets generated so that you can pick and choose any kind of like attribute that you want, or it can even autocomplete the attribute or the object for you. So once you're happy with this, then you can go ahead and hit the execute button. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. And then we have a problem. It says devices here. Okay, so I think I've missed the S. So if you make sure that you've got the right object. So in that case, I want a list of all the devices. So I'm gonna rectify this by just adding the S, and then I'm gonna execute that again, and then we can see from the right hand side the result of my query. So again, I'm gonna go through the hierarchy of the data structure that we've received from the server. Start with data and then the list of devices. And inside the list of devices, we have the name of the object, which is C 9248P-SW1. That has an IPv4 address of 10.112.1.1/32. And you can see the interfaces. It has a couple of interfaces assigned to it. That's Gig Ethernet 000, which has an IP address of this, and also a loopback interface that is 0 with this IP address. And you can see that so on and so forth. That's the switch 2, switch 3, switch 4, switch 5, switch 6. As you can see, all these attributes obviously are part of the query that I have raised to the server, which is the exact data that I want from the server at this point in time. And obviously that would depends on your use case. So this is pretty much it, folks, for the GraphQL on Nautobot and NetBox. So what I'm going to do next, I'm going to walk you through how we can then interact with Nautobot and NetBox using GraphQL from the Python code. Okay, folks, so I opened up my IDE and I've created a new Python file called GraphQL_demo.py. And what I'm going to do first, I'm going to import the first library, which is requests. And then I'm going to say from rich import print as r_print. And then what I'm going to do, I'm going to create my first query, and that is going to be assigned into a variable or a string variable. So I'm going to say GraphQL_str to string, and I'm going to say query underscore netbox, and that I'm going to assign this to query, open curly bracket, and I'm going to hit the space, and I'm going to say device underscore list. I'm going to open another curly bracket, and I'm going to hit the tab button, and I'm going to say I want ID. I also want name, and then I'm going to close that curly bracket, and also I'm going to close that query. So that is my initial query that I have constructed, and I'm just going to examine it first, and then I will expand upon it at a later stage. So next, what I'm going to say payload echo. I'm going to say the key is going to be query, and the value is going to be the string that I've just built. And then I'm going to say netbox underscore URL equal, paste that one here. So https :/192.168.110.130.130 /GraphQL /. And then also I'm going to create the headers. So I'm going to create header underscore netbox. And then I am going to say I want the following attributes. So bear with me 1 second. So basically, I am just creating the normal headers that I have created in the past. And if you are not sure how to do that, please refer back to my previous videos. Else, I'm going to carry on. So next, I'm going to say response equal, or response underscore netbox, I should say, equal to requests post. And inside there, I'm going to specify the netbox underscore URL. I'm also going to say the headers equal header underscore netbox. I'm going to also specify the JSON, which is the query that we've created. I'm going to assign it to payload variable. And then finally, I'm going to say verify equal to false. So at this stage, we should be able to get something back from the server. So what I'm going to do initially, just to test this, I'm going to check the status of the actual request. So I'm going to say response underscore netbox dot status underscore code, and I'm going to execute that. And you can see that we get 200. So which means I can then reveal the data that I want the data to be printed. And I'm going to say print response underscore netbox dot JSON. So you can see that we have received some data. And what I'm going to do next, I'm going to make it look prettier than this. So I'm going to say r underscore print. I'm going to open the brackets, and inside the brackets, I'm going to say response underscore netbox JSON. So as you can see, guys, that we get the data that we after, the device list. So you've got the first device, router, switch, another router, and so on and so forth. So what I want to do next is I want to be able to kind of like iterate through the list and see what I can get, for instance. So if I say for each key, each value, and response underscore netbox.json, and I'm going to specify the data, and I'm going to say the items. I want to see each key, so I'm going to print each key, and also I'm going to print each value. So you can see here that we get the key is device underscore list, and inside that device underscore list we get all the objects. So what I can do then next is I can say for each device and each value, I just want to print the name. So let's say that I want to print the name. So if I then comment these two lines and hit the execution button, you can see that I'm only printing the name. So let's say that I want to print only the name which is equivalent to this, for instance. So that means I can use the if statement. So if I say if this name of the device in each underscore device, and then open up square brackets and then just specify the object, I can then say I want to print that. So if I execute that again, I should be able to only display the name. Yeah, it looks like we are printing the whole body. So what I'm going to do next, I'm going to execute that, and you can see that we are only printing the name that we after, the name of the device. So this is pretty much the query that we built originally. So what happens if I want to expand on that? So let's say, for example, that I want to get the interfaces as well. So I want to say, for instance, like I want the interface. So I'm going to say interface. And then I'm going to open another curly bracket and I'm going to close it here. And then I'm going to tap another indentation. And I'm going to say I want the name. And then I'm going to execute this. And obviously we will also need to kind of like, rectify this. So I'm going to comment all of that. And I'm going to print everything. So if I go all the way up, you can see that we've got the data from the hierarchy, and then we go down the list of device list, and then we have the first object, the name of the first object, and then the interfaces that are associated to that object, gig00, etc., etc. And then we move to the next object, and so on and so forth. So if we also want to display the IPv4 address, let's say, so we would say primary underscore IP4 and open curly bracket, close curly bracket, and then another indentation, and then we specify the display variable. And then we hit that again. And then if I go all the way up, so we see the first object is here, the list of interfaces are here, and then we can see the IP address that is associated with the management interface for that particular device. So what I'm going to do next, I'm going to show you how we can do the same with Nautobot system. So again, what we're going to do, I'm going to comment all the code that I have built. So I'm going to comment it all. And then I'm going to start by creating the GraphQL query. For Nautobot. And inside that query, I'm going to say query, open curly bracket, close curly bracket, and I'm going to do an indentation to set the devices. Open curly bracket, close curly bracket, and I'm going to specify the ID as well as the name. So that is my initial query again. I'm going to create a payload variable. And inside that payload, I'm going to set the key to query. And the variable, the value of that key is going to be the GraphQL query that I've created. Next, I'm going to set the Nautobot underscore URL. And I'm going to paste that in a second. As you can see that there is a subtle differences between the NetBox system and Nautobot system, so please pay attention to this. Okay, so what I'm going to do next, I'm going to create the headers. Nautobot. Headers underscore Nautobot, and I'm going to assign that dictionary. And inside the dictionary, I'm going to set the following attributes. Next, I'm going to say response underscore Nautobot equal to requests post. Inside that, I'm going to say Nautobot URL. And then I'm going to set the headers to header underscore Nautobot. And I'm going to set the payload, the JSON payload that we created. And I'm going to say verify equal to false. What I'm going to do next, I'm going to print the status of that particular query or request, let's say, to check if we haven't missed anything. So I'm going to say response underscore Nautobot dot status underscore code, and then I'm going to hit enter. And we get 200, which means that the query and everything looks good. So what I'm going to do next, I'm going to actually print that. So I'm going to say r underscore print. I want to print this. As you can see, guys, we get the data, and inside that data dictionary, we get a list of devices, and each device, it comes as a dictionary. The key is UUID for the ID and the name of that particular device, and that covers all 6 devices that we have configured in our Nautobot environment. So what I could do, I could potentially increase the query and add other attributes to the query. So let's say, for example, what happens if we want to add the primary IP address. So I'm going to say primary underscore IP4 address, and I'm going to open up curly brackets and I'm going to close it, and then I'm going to do the indentation and I'm going to specify the address. But also I want to be able to see the interfaces, and inside the interfaces I want to see the name of that interface as well as the IP address as well. I'm going to say IP underscore addresses, open curly bracket, close curly bracket, and then I'm going to do the indentation to specify the address attribute. So once I'm done with this, I can then go ahead and execute this, and we can see from the query that we get the data structure, which is a list of devices, and the first device that we get has a UUID of this, the name, the IPv4 address, and the interfaces that are part of it, or that are associated with that particular device. So we have gig 000 comes with IP address of 10.112.0.0, and then we have the loopback address, which is assigned to 10.112.1.1/32. Okay guys, so we've reached the end of the video. If you found this video helpful, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, and if you haven't already, please hit that subscribe button and turn on the notifications so you never miss our future tutorials and tech insights. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to drop a comment below. I read all your comments and I'm here to assist you. Stay curious, stay inspired, and until next time, peace.